Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about 5 must-have crankbaits for pre-spawn bass fishing. We're going to go through from coldest water temperature to warmest water temperature, which crankbait you need to be throwing under each condition, and why they're so effective. And these 5 crankbaits should be the ones that you have in your box to make sure you catch more bass this spring. So stay tuned and let's get right into it. So there is no one crankbait that will cover all of spring bass fishing, as the water temp is ever changing, the fish are always moving, conditions are changing, water can get clear, muddy, all different kinds of stuff. We're not going to focus as much on color in this episode because you can pick your color based on your water conditions, but we're mostly going to focus on the action and depth these baits will provide and why they work so well under different conditions. Starting with the first one right here, this is going to be the Rapala Shad Rap. I've talked about this one in a video recently. It is super effective in very cold water. I'm talking almost with ice on the water. I've caught fish down to 40, 42 degree water temperature with this bait right here, and it's solely because of the tight wiggle it has, because of how narrow and slim and small this bait is. It basically just shimmies through the water. It doesn't pull real hard. It doesn't wobble real hard. It doesn't do any of that. It is a very finesse crankbait approach, and in that cold water, it can get you some bites. You're not going to have a lights out day on this thing and catch 100 bass. You're going to be picking off the couple bass that are moving up on very sunny days when the banks are starting to get warm. You'll have a couple bass just slide up out of deeper water, try and sun themselves on that bank. That is when this crankbait is going to play. This bait will not dive deeper than like 6 or 7 foot. You got to throw it on a spinning rod. It's hard to cast. I did a video recently on the whole setup you need to throw baits like these, and I'll link it at the end of today's video. But it is basically a very specialized crankbait that I use first thing in the spring before the water gets warm enough to use some of the other crankbaits that I'm going to show you here. And if I was to leave any off the list, it would be this one, depending on where you fish. But I've caught them down in Alabama and Kentucky on baits like this. So even in that very cold winter time, this would be one that I would like to have no matter where I'm at in the country. The next bait up on my list would be the Rapala DT series. They have the DT6, the DT8 now, the DT10, and they go even deeper, or they also have some shallower ones like a DT4, but pretty much I stick in that 6 to 10 foot range. These things are awesome right after that shad wrap, and probably about 45 degree water temperature will be when I start throwing this one. It has the same narrow sides, flat-sided balsa wood crankbait. It has a tight wiggle to it, so it works awesome in that cold water. It has no rattles. That's not what you're looking for this time of year. It just basically is a subtle crankbait approach, but this is one you can throw on a bait caster with 10 or 12 pound test. You can do different things with it than you can with that shad wrap. It's a little bit easier to fish. So if your water never gets below 45 degrees, you could probably just start with this one. Up here in the north, I like to start with the shad wrap first. Sometimes I'll just have both tied on and fish them both, since one goes on my spinning rods and one goes on my bait caster. But this is an awesome crankbait to have in the springtime. Comes in a variety of colors. Like I said, it comes in a variety of depths as well. So no matter how deep or shallow your fish are getting, you can use this bait. But I use the 6 to 10 footer just like I do with the shad wrap. I keep that up shallow. Those warmer sunny days when those fish are going to push up shallow, that's when I'm going to use this crankbait. And this is even a crankbait you can use all through the pre-spawn up into like the 55, low 60 water temperature. It just performs awesome all the time. They love that balsa wood crankbait in the springtime, that tight wiggle. That's what you're looking for in a good crankbait this time of year. So make sure you got to have some DT series crankbaits in your box. They are an absolute fish catcher in the springtime. My next one up is one that everybody knows by now, and that is the Rapala OTTS Garage crankbait. They make the tiny now as well that goes like 4 foot deep, and then this one goes about 6 foot deep. Since this is a more shallow diving crankbait, almost like a square bill, it's not a square bill because it has the rounded bill on it, but it has the same like diving depth range there. I don't pull this one out until about 47, 48 degree water temperature. A little bit later than the Rapala DT series, just because that one can get a little bit deeper, so that one gets the nod in the deeper, colder water. But once you get that 47, 48 degree range, you're really going to start having fish show up on the banks. Whether you have warm days or not, they're just going to get ready to start moving, start scouting out areas, start making their transition to where they want to be for the spawn. That's when I'll pull this bait out. 47 and above, Again, this is one that'll work all through the pre-spawn as well, up into that low 50, mid 50, even to 60-degree water range when you're fishing. This is one, you gotta have it. But pretty much everybody knows that already. This is a very popular bait. A lot of people fish it. I just kind of hold off on it a little bit longer than my other crankbaits because I don't fish very shallow in the cold water. But depending on the water that you fish, the places that you fish, if your fish like to get shallow or live shallow year round, this can be an excellent crankbait in even colder water. I know Octafo likes to fish this thing all winter long. He fishes down in Tennessee, so their water might stay a little bit warmer than it does up here. I've never fished on Cherokee or those type of places, so I'm not positive. But this bait is a absolute fish catcher as well in cold water, solely because you got your flat sides again, gives it a tight wiggle, and that's what you want in the cold water. It's another silent balsa wood crankbait, which is exactly what you're looking for. This thing throws excellent on a bait caster. I mean, you can bomb this one on a bait caster, even though it's a balsa wood crankbait. Rapala knocked it out of the park on this bait here. I have thrown this thing all this past spring, caught a ton of fish on it. It works awesome. I've caught largemouth, smallmouth. It just catches a bunch of fish, and this is one that you gotta have this spring. And this one is going to be my fourth pick. This one I will pull out in 48-degree water temperature as well, or even colder sometimes, but more for spotted bass or smallmouth. If you're using this for largemouth, I kind of let it get 48 and above, depending on the type of fish that live in your lake. I've thrown this thing on Lake Erie in 45-degree water and caught them, but they're smallmouth bass, so they like that colder water. When I fish for largemouth with it around here, I usually let it get 48, 50 degrees on those type of lakes before I start throwing this bait. That is the Spro Rock Crawler. This thing catches a ton of fish. This is the first plastic crankbait in the lineup that I've mentioned. It's got rattles in it. It has a wide body and a wide wobble, but this is the one when those fish start to get fired up and they're eating. This is the one that I'll go to. I can cover a ton of water with it. It can draw fish in. Dirtier water, you can get some of those brighter colors and really have the vibration, the sound, the bright color to get fish from a distance. And this one is the deepest diving one in my selection. So when those fish are really staging up on points or some deeper banks before they go to where they want to go, this will be the one to get them first. This thing gets down to about 10 or 12 foot deep, and it can really catch some fish when they're staging up to move into different places to spawn. This also comes in a ton of colors as well. I fish mostly craw patterns myself in the springtime, but it comes in some chartreuses, it comes in some shad patterns even. So you can basically do everything you need with this crankbait right here in the springtime. I'll fish it, like I said, starting 48-degree water range for largemouth, and this one I'll fish up until about the high 50s. Then those fish will start to get too shallow to really feed on this crankbait, so I'll go to some of those shallower diving crankbaits up in that higher water temperature. But that period of time between 48 and 55-degree water temperature, this thing can really blast some fish. So you got to have this one in your box as well. And the last crankbait you absolutely have to have for spring bass fishing. This thing kills it once that water gets above 50 degrees. Second plastic crankbait in the lineup, and that is going to be the Spro Little John. You can fish this thing down in a little bit colder water. I've caught fish in like 47, 48 degree range on it, but I really like that water to be a little bit warmer because this isn't a balsa wood crankbait. It has the rattles. It has a little bit wider action compared to a balsa wood crankbait just because of the plastic. I don't know what it is. Sometimes that balsa wood crankbait performs better in colder water, but this bait also has the flat side, so it will work in some colder water, those lower 50-degree days. It'll still work just because of the flat sides. It has a tight wiggle to it. And this comes in an MD and a regular size. So the MD, medium diver, this thing gets down about 7-9 foot. You can cover a little bit deeper water. And then once that water starts to warm up, like I said, that 60-degree range, high 50s, I start throwing some different crankbaits than that rock crawler. This is the one that I'm referring to. I'll throw the regular version. It only goes like 3 to 5 foot deep, or I can even put it on 15-pound test and fish it in like 2 foot of water. I can really cover a ton of water shallow with this thing, and it comes through cover great up shallow once those fish are really getting there, ready to spawn. This one comes in a bunch of colors as well. I carry my shad patterns, my chartreuses, my crawfish colors. Same thing on this. I think they got some bluegill colors as well if you want to fish it shallow around the spawn. It's just an awesome crankbait that I've caught a ton of fish on over the years, and it really performs great in those colder pre-spawn time periods. So if you enjoyed today's video talking all about some must-have crankbaits for this spring, go ahead and check this video out here. all about how to fish that shad wrap that I was talking about for the first crankbait. With the spring coming up, that's going to be the one you want to have tied on. And make sure you hit that subscribe button down below so you don't miss any more of my fishing tips coming up.